Hello everyone, this is Andrew. Welcome to Keen on America.
On July 4th, 2026, America will be 250 years old. An anniversary that will, no doubt, be greeted with a mixture of celebration, contemplation, and resignation. In Keen on America, Andrew talks not just about the American past and present, but also speculates on its future. What, Andrew asks, will be the 21st century fate of this now venerable American republic?
Hello everybody, it is Saturday, the last day of May 31st, 2025. I think I'm going to put this out on June 1, so we're between May and June. And in technological terms, it seems as if we're between ages. This week, I went to an excellent event in San Francisco at Shack 15, put on by my friend Peter Layden. He's been on the show before. He is running something called the Great Progression Network. And he imagines we're on the brink of remarkable things, that the next 25 years are going to be more abundant than any other moment in human history. And as it happens, my friend Keith Teare seems to agree. This week's editorial in That Was the Week newsletter, a summary of tech news, suggests, and I'm quoting the editorial, "We are accelerating to abundance. Is it a good thing?" Keith is joining us, as always, from the home of abundance, Palo Alto in San Francisco, at the heart of Silicon Valley. Keith, is that a rhetorical question at the end? We are accelerating to abundance. Is it a good thing? I assume you think it is a good thing.
Well, it should self-evidently be a good thing. It should be a rhetorical question, but actually, it's a contested question, and hence the need for the question mark and the discussion, because a lot of people believe that it's a bad thing, and essentially anti-human at the core, and that's the debate.
Well, let's get to the heart of it, because it's controversial and complicated. What do you mean? You've got the image of a car created by AI, an image of happy family in a car, accelerating to abundance with the city in the background, sunlit, not really very like San Francisco. What do you mean by abundance? Because this is a word you use in your editorial.
No, I think that's a great starting point, because the word abundance is thrown around quite a bit currently, from Mark Andreessen to Peter Thiel to others.
And of course to Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, whose book Abundance is a massive bestseller, still outselling any book at the moment.
Yeah. My definition of abundance is relative to human need. So, and by human need, you really mean human need with a capital H, the whole world. And abundance is that point in history where economics allows needs, defined as pretty much whatever you want, to be delivered free, almost free of cost, so that life itself can be sustained, cheaply, if not free. And obviously that can't happen unless there is automation, probably significant robotics and AI. But it's easy for anyone to imagine that if there was AI, robotics, and the ability to apply that to almost any human endeavor, food growth, building houses, anything really, that you would be in an age of abundance where humans, at least, would not be required to produce their own life.
Yeah, and Peter Layden in his event, Stephen Johnson was there from Google, a number of other senior tech people. It was packed there. It was astonishing. He talks about there being the three legs of our age of abundance. One is AI, another is energy abundance, and the third is biotech and our ability to create or recreate species. You're as confident as he is. You say the numbers are there, the real numbers, and that it's self-evident. I'm quoting you, we're about to unlock human potential on a scale we've barely begun to imagine. So what are these numbers, Keith? Why is it so overwhelmingly self-evident that we're on the verge of this remarkable new age of abundance?
Well, I think with numbers, you have to go to the core. The core is gross domestic product and the cost of producing it. Those are really the only two variables you really have to worry about. So gross domestic product, writ large on the world scale, is what we're capable of producing and consuming, and the cost of producing that is again self-evident. Energy is a big part of that. And so if you can reduce the costs as close as possible to zero, whilst increasing the outputs as close as possible to infinity, those are the numbers. And what this week's newsletter points to is just a few small indicators of those trends. With energy, for example, the declining costs of solar energy, which, by the way, I don't believe is a panacea for energy. I think nuclear is way more likely to be the driver of that. But even fossil fuels, properly done, is part of that as well. So energy is clearly declining in cost, and the amount of energy being able to produce reaches infinity the more you can leverage nuclear and solar. Wind, I'm more skeptical of.
Yeah, I mean, let's also be really clear, Keith, that this argument you're making and Layden's making is very controversial. One of the other people I had on the show last few days was Tim Jackson, a British academic who has a new book out called The Care Economy. And he takes the reverse position. He suggests that GDP isn't relevant. And actually, our societies are becoming, in his language, poorer and poorer, less and less caring. So this is certainly not a self-evident argument. Let's focus on AI.
Just drill down there a bit. What does he mean by caring, and why is
well,
caring,
you need to read his book on the care economy.
Why is care a category when it comes to progress?
Well, in his view, it is. I mean, he thinks that the more focused we are on GDP, the less we care about each other, the more atomized, alienated, and miserable we are. And there is certainly.
I agree with him, but.
Well, you need to read the book.
No, I agree, but
and look at the interview that I did. I mean, he's.
But going to it, there is a point of agreement there, which is the more that GDP is automated, the less humans will have to focus on it. Actually, humans will be free to think about each other and themselves. So I don't think there's a contradiction between GDP growth, as long as it's produced through AI and robotics, and a more human existence. In fact, I think they're completely correlated.
I mean, I think that, and this is an old argument that's going to go on and on for the next several decades, but the problem, I think, with your argument is, and this is the same in Albert Wenger's argument. He's a friend of ours. He's been on the show. He's written about this a lot. You're saying that there's going to be this abundance of intelligence, which will result in us having less, and I'm quoting you here, less labor time and increased leisure time. So the key question will be, what are your hobbies in contrast to what do you do? My critique of this is twofold. Firstly, most people don't have hobbies. And secondly, people like having jobs. How would you respond to both those?
Well, I
mean, not everyone's going to be a stamp collector, Keith, or play with model trains.
I think your statement on the face of it is correct if you freeze history in the present. In other words, the present creates a situation where if you don't have a job, you don't get to live very well. And so having a job becomes prime directive number one. There are two groups of workers, those whose job is something they love, and those whose job is just a job so that they can do the things they love. I think the majority are the second, people who do a job so they can do the things they love. And whether you call it a hobby or just their life, human focus on doing the things they love is a lot stronger than the focus on a job. The job is a required necessity. Now, if that changes so that a job is not a required necessity, I think you're going to find that more humans do the things they love. It may not be stamp collecting or trains, but it'll be something. My wife likes reading. She loves listening to podcasts. She likes walking.
Yeah, but you can do that anyway with a job. I mean, you can't you get sick of listening to podcasts all day. But the bigger question, and I'm not sure everyone would agree that on your argument that most people work in order to enable their hobbies. I think most people work to feed themselves. But the real question, I know this is a hard question, but it's so unclear, is where the money is going to come from to allow people to do nothing all day or to pursue their own hobbies. Who is going to pay for this new information age? Who is going to, where is the money going to come from? Because everyone needs to pay their rent, everyone needs to eat, everyone needs to clothe themselves. Where's the resources going to come from?
Well, so let's just remind ourselves of what money is. David Ricardo and Adam Smith are the architects of money theory. And what money is a physical form or a digital form of value. And value is produced through labor and capital coming together to make things that didn't exist before by adding value through manufacturing or service creation or whatever. So money is the symbolic form of human endeavor. So in a automated economy, there'll be more value created than ever in human history. And so money, if you still choose to use money as the symbol of value, will be plentiful.
Well, that's a very vague response. Who owns the factories? Who owns the AI plants, the networks, the algorithms?
So then you have to move from economics to politics to discuss that. And they're correlated. There are many possible answers. You remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the need to have agency to change the future. So that's a contested future today. And some people will believe that Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Google and Microsoft will own everything. Others believe that societies should tax all the products of automation at a very high rate, like 98%, and distribute the output to everyone. And so that's a contested future.
I understand that's a contested future. All futures are contested. But in your argument about we are accelerating to abundance, you have this idea that we'll all be able to just pursue our own hobbies. It's a utopia, maybe a utopia. It's a vision that's been articulated many times before and probably many times since after we have this discussion. Where's the money going to come from? Are you suggesting that the state should own these big companies?
No, I just answered. There's going to be more money than you've ever known.
You sound like Trump now.
Well, it's obvious, right? If you can produce automated with no labor costs, and you and me have both run businesses. What's the biggest cost when you run a business? Always labor costs, always. So if you can reduce the cost of production by removing labor costs, you have huge profit margins. And that's just math, right? You can't really disagree with that. So if that's true, the amount of value being created and the amount of money that could symbolize that value is unlimited.
But are you suggesting then that the only way this age of abundance is going to come about is through 98% tax on these big tech companies?
Yeah, well, if you ask me my point of view, I think that...
Well, you've written an editorial, so it is your point.
If you ask me my point of view, and by the way, my editorial is making an economic point, and you're asking me a political question. Economically, we're accelerating to abundance, no doubt about it. Politically, that could mean we're heading for autocracy, or it could mean we're heading to a true demos. That's a political question.
You're avoiding my question.
No, I'm not. I'm forcing you to define the question properly.
No, I'm asking the question very simply. You're talking about this massive amount of wealth, new wealth, which you may be right about. But since it's, at least at the moment, tends to be owned by a small group of companies, tech companies in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, why should everybody else have access? How is everyone else going to have access to this new wealth?
Well, it's in my view, you need a revolution, if you're asking my opinion, to seize the means of production. But if you're asking me what I think will actually happen, I think that the rate of corporate tax for automated production of profits will massively rise to enable the human race to collectively benefit from the level of capability that we have collectively arrived at. And so I think there'll be a peaceful transition to way more distributed economics. And if I was the Democrat who believes in abundance, I'd be focused on that, because that is an easy way. Corporate tax currently is 21%, I believe, in the US. It's different in different countries. But if you can create an automation tax where there's almost zero or even zero labor involved to a much higher rate, then I think you will create, something closer to a Swedish system, even better than the Swedish system, where the profits of our collective efforts are enjoyed by everyone.
Yeah, I think it's very unlikely myself.
Well, it's a contested future.
It's more than contested, especially in the United States. But some of the articles that you connect with this week are on what Ed Kilgore in New York Intelligence talks about, the abundance agenda. It's worth noting also that the Klein-Thompson book on abundance is about the failure of Democrats to really recognize and realize that abundance. So they're anything but the utopians, Klein and Thompson.
Is that book still a bestseller?
Yeah. I mean, it's doing incredibly well because there is this constituency for it, and there's a growing debate within the Democratic Party about which way to go between, shall we say, an old left and a new center or a new technocracy. So this thing's going to get played out over the next few years.
Yeah, and if you take the Bernie Sanders AOC tour, they focused on a couple of things. They focused on the billionaires, and they focused on some social justice issues. And neither of those are really capturing any optimism about what could happen if abundance is real. So it seems like the most vocal Democrats are resistors to this direction, and that isn't going to serve them well. I think Klein is on the fence a little bit. He doesn't really follow through with anything practical, but at least he's asking the right question.
He does. I mean, they talk about how to realize real things like high-speed trains and why the Americans are so bad at building stuff in contrast to the Japanese. There was an interesting piece. I sent it to you. I don't know if you included it in this week's newsletter by Karen Howe in the New York Times on Silicon Valley being at an inflection point. It's always, of course, at an inflection point. And I'm quoting her now. She said, the leading AI giants are no longer merely multinational corporations. They're growing into modern-day empires. With the full support of the federal government, soon they will be able to reshape most spheres of society as they please, from the political to the economic to the production of science. I don't think she necessarily disagrees with you in terms of what a moment we are in history. But I think her notion of inflection point is certainly more ambivalent and perhaps pessimistic than yours. You're still not clear, Keith, though, on, I mean, apart from 98% tax, how else are these big tech companies, the OpenAIs, the Microsofts, the Googles, how else are they going to get controlled?
Well, so look, somebody has to implement the benefits of AI and robotics. Most likely, in a capitalist world that we live in, that is going to be big companies backed by large private equity investors, possibly by public markets. So at least you have to start with the practical reality that the government isn't going to do this. It's going to be big companies because the government's incapable of doing it. So once you accept that that's right, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that that Google and Apple, Apple's a laggard here, but they will catch up. Microsoft, OpenAI, and all the others are going to be the trailblazers, and power to them because no one else is going to do it.
Trailblazers? What do you mean trailblazers? In what sense?
Well, the application of science to practical outcomes. Obviously, science itself.
But they're not going to realize your goal of everyone being able to pursue their own hobbies.
No, they certainly can. They definitely can, because the precondition for my world is the production of value. If you don't produce value, you can't distribute it. So value comes out of, in the world we live in today, capitalism. And capitalism is the pursuit of profit. And that's why labor costs will go down, because every capitalist will want to reduce the cost of production. And that, generally speaking, is a good thing. It's a mistake to think that's a bad thing.
Well, I'll have to get you on the show with Tim "Fuck the Patriarchy" Jackson. He has a very different take. The other problem I have, Keith, with these arguments about abundance, you say we are accelerating to abundance, is you may be right when it comes to a certain kind of intelligence, but the 2020s seem to me to be marked not so much by abundance, by increasing scarcity, particularly physical scarcity of land, an obsession with immigration, crowded cities, more and more expensive real estate. So whenever people bring up this promise or reality of abundance, I always think scarcity. What are the new scarcities of your abundant age? Is it land?
No, actually, the biggest scarcity is human beings. The declining birth rates.
Is that good or bad?
I think it doesn't. It tells you people are not optimistic about the future when they don't have children, and that's a symptom of current political malaise, but
and
also
economic. Right?
And well, economic not so much, because it's the middle class and upper class who are having less children, not poor people.
But what about the scarcity of land in the context of?
I don't think there is a scarcity.
Well, hold on. Of the I mean, I know you're not a great fan of the nation state, but the obsession with immigration, the fact that it's harder and harder to migrate around the world. I mean, even the Indians, everyone, the Chinese, everyone's throwing people out. It's not just Trump.
Yeah,
the same is true in Western Europe. So for all this abundance or theoretical abundance, the promise of abundant intelligence, fewer and fewer people are able to travel.
I place the immigration debate in a different layer when it comes to economics, politics, society, and so on. I think the immigration debate is largely driven by the changing balance of world economic power. I think the relative decline of the US, the de-manufacturing base in the US, the rise of Midwest, Rust Belt employment and prospects all leads to a kind of an insecurity about the future, which immigration exacerbates and becomes a focus for.
But that is still, you can always explain it and you can always suggest it's irrational, but that is a real scarcity, isn't it?
There's absolutely zero scarcity of land. There's so much empty land, it's not even funny. But
perceived scarcity, which results in the fact that it's harder and harder to, say, migrate into the United States.
That's happening in the political and social layers. That's not grounded in economics. In fact, the US needs a lot more immigrants, especially for unskilled labor at the moment, until it's no longer required.
But does it matter whether it's the political or the social? It's real.
It's real, but like all contested futures, it's largely the narrative is largely founded on a belief in decline. at the root, you have to believe in decline to be anti-immigration. And the truth is, there will be no decline. There's relative decline, but not absolute decline. GDP is going to grow, and the need for people, as long as employment is still required, like for agriculture, for example, or for lower paid jobs. Clearly, there's a need for more, especially young immigrants, especially unskilled immigrants, by the way.
Well, we shall see. This will play out over many years. Keith is an optimist, like Peter Layden at the Great Progression, who believes we're on the verge, 2025 to 2050, of a great leap forward for humanity. We shall see. Meanwhile, my interview of the week was with Greg Lukianov of FIRE, a free speech group, a nonprofit free speech group. The reason I chose it was I asked Lukianov, he's a very influential figure when it comes to free speech, about what area of media he considers to be the freest as a model. And he responded, Substack. Is Substack the future? Is that where we're all going to do our hobbies, Keith? We'll all have Substack accounts where, like you, like Peter Layden, where we'll all articulate our vision of the world?
I think Substack's probably a step on a journey, not the top step.
Not the final destination.
Not the final destination. I do think that creative people require outlets, and if somebody can provide them with the tools, they'll use them. And that's really what Substack has been very good at doing. I had a bit of a back and forth with Hamish McKenzie this week on Substack notes and chat, where he made the claim that Substack was disrupting social media, not disrupting old media. And I think that is a bit of a stretch. I don't think it's disrupting social media at all. I think there's different influencing layers. Substack is one of them.
Well, I think Substack is a lot of people who historically would have worked in big media now for large media companies are opening their own store on Substack and building their brand, the Andrew Sullivans of the world. So I think that's where Substack is shaping or reshaping big media.
Exactly, I agree with you. That is what it's doing, but it's also trying to be a bit of a walled garden. I mean, one of the points I made is that, why can't you stream a Substack video to X and LinkedIn and YouTube like we do here on Restream? Why insist on it only being viewable on Substack? And Substack's service to a creator should include distribution.
But it is, when you put something on Substack, a video, then it gives you the option after you publish of distributing it on YouTube and LinkedIn and X.
Yeah, but that's one step less. No, actually, you can't distribute the video. You can distribute a link to it, but you can't actually distribute the video.
Well, it's the end of screens, at least according to your post of the week. I'm not sure whether that's Substack or broadly. Tell me about this post of the week. AI equals the end of screens.
Well, so this is Alex Kantrowitz, and he's making the point that keyboards and screens represent the interactive stage of the internet, where you have to put in inputs in and get results back in words and images and possibly video. And he says that's going to give way to spoken words and spoken responses, and screens will disappear because you won't need them. You'll be able to say, make an appointment with Andrew for That Was the Week next Friday, and that basically screens and keyboards will look like typewriters in the future. And so he's going to that stage where the movie Her envisages, where you have a buddy that travels around with you whether it's just in your earpods or whether it's a pair of glasses. There's various different potential form factors for that, but that basically you will have an unlimited number of assistants traveling around with you that you can ask to do things at any point and they'll be done. You won't need a calendar because you'll get reminded of your next appointment and so on and so forth.
You could just get a wife, Keith.
I don't think of wives as service agents in that way. So we made
That's probably why you have a good marriage. And I wonder whether there was an interesting piece in the New Yorker on this, on the new alliance between Sam Altman of OpenAI and Johnny Ive, who was behind the iPhone, of course, who has his new interface company. I think OpenAI has acquired in stock, of course, the Ive company. The New Yorker asked, what could possibly go wrong? I think this comes back to what we've been talking about. It's all very well having this theory, but in practice, we got to rely on the Altmans of the world, and they're not always as reliable or perhaps as honest as we would like.
Well, I think the unspoken truth there is that Johnny Ive wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Steve Jobs. Johnny Ive is not a creator.
Vice versa in a way as well, or not?
No, not. I mean, Steve Jobs could hire any one of 100 Johnny Ives, but there's only one Steve Jobs. And Johnny Ive should be grateful to Jobs for the opportunity to build the iPhone. Now, that doesn't mean anything bad. He did a fantastic job of designing everything he designed, and he's a wonderful designer. But designers are not creators in the same way that Jobs was a creator. Saying no to a lot of things and yes to the one thing that will work is solely the Jobs.
So they'll come back. So whether we admire Ives or not, it's going to require somebody of Jobs's vision and determination to get to the end of screens, isn't it? It's not just going to happen slowly.
Yeah, and Sam Altman may not be that guy, or he may be. Let's see. But I think the good thing about that combination is the understanding that there needs to be a combination. That Johnny Ive couldn't go and do that on his own. And remember, Johnny Ive's this slick Englishman with an English accent that uses words like excellent a lot and unbelievable and
abundance, probably.
And probably abundance. And it's like 90% superficial words. The real work is in answering the what is it. That's not a Johnny Ive question. That's a Sam Altman question.
Well, as if, Keith, that's where we're going to end today. You and I saw each other last weekend actually more than last weekend, 10 days ago in Bilbao. We know what happened in Bilbao. When was it? The 21st of May, Keith?
It was the 21st of May, a day that will go down in history as my brother's birthday. That's the only reason I remember.
Infamy. So there's no abundance in football, is there?
There's
you
only
win or you lose. What's going to happen to Manchester United? An age of scarcity.
Well, we're 10 years into that age, and I think we just bounced off the bottom, because when you lose to Spurs, it truly is rock bottom.
Yeah, maybe true. We're in the Champions League and you're not. We will see you next week, Keith. Good luck. And that was the week for the last week of May, first week of June 2025. Lots more to come on abundance and scarcity. Have a good week, Keith. I'll talk to you next week.
Bye.